And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on.
point.
I want to tell you. No. Listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show. And I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped, please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame. We're trying to have a conversation about a very serious situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
Jump over immediately, and again, you
absolutely not. You are incorrect.
They are responsible, because I can tell you that when the UK,
absolutely
when Great Britain was fighting the Nazis during World War II, no one asked what's going on in Dresden. It was the Nazis targeting London, and you targeted Dresden. So
listen,
shame on you if you go on with that false narrative.
We're not talking about that, and in hindsight, many people have listened. And in hindsight, many people have readdressed that kind of carpet bombing.
Oh, I see. Now you're Mr. Clean. Shame on you.
Absolutely not. And I'm not. Listen, Mr. Bennett, I am not in the military. I am a journalist asking you questions. Are you going to let me ask you a question, or you continue shouting at me? We've already distinguished between Hamas and the Palestinians. I'm asking you very directly. What
do you want to ask?
Is going to be done to make sure that those innocent people don't get killed as innocent Jewish people were killed on Saturday?
Well, we're going to target Hamas, and we're telling Hamas that if you use anyone as your human shield, and you're going to shoot at us using human shields, that it's their responsibility. Listen, mister, if someone is shooting at your children and hiding behind a human shield, will you shoot back or not? I'm asking you a question. Someone's shooting at your children, but hiding behind civilians. What's the answer? What would you do?
Mr. Bennett, I'm not here to answer your questions. I've asked you your questions, and you have not answered them directly. All right, we'll stop. We'll leave it there. Naftali Bennett.
Eradicate Hamas.
All right.
Theodore Herzl, the founder of the Zionist Congress, wrote once that the common people have not, and indeed cannot have, any historic comprehension. They do not know that the sins of the Middle Ages are now being visited on the nations of Europe. In Part 1, we talked about the precursors of Zionism, the hate targeted toward the Jews, the absorption of that hatred and ideals by the Jews back into the world in early Zionist texts, like the writings of Moses Hess, and his influence not only on Marxism but Zionism, with Theodore Herzl saying, "Since Spinoza Juri has brought forth no greater spirit than this forgotten, faded Moses Hess." For Part 2, we will look at Ottoman Palestine, the Messianic Age, and finally the First Zionist Conference. If Part 1 was Proto-Zionism, then Part 2 is the start of Zionism. Before the Ottoman era, the Mamluks reigned over the region. They were a kingdom formed by former slaves, plucked from their tribes in the Caucasus region, converted to Islam, and trained in the art of war. Against the backdrop of a chaotic world, they emerged victorious, halting the advance of the Mongols and establishing their own realm for nearly 300 years. In 1516, their empire fell to the Ottomans. Under Ottoman rule, Jerusalem attained its rightful prominence as attested to in the magnificent walls encircling the Old City, constructed by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Queen Roxolana, also known as Kaseki Sultan and Suleiman's beloved, dedicated an endowment in 1552 for the benefit of the poor, the needy, the weak, and the distressed. This complex encompassed a monastery, an inn, a public kitchen, a bakery, stables, and storage spaces, requiring various roles to operate this institution, including stewards, clerks, master cooks, food inspectors, dishwashers, millers, handymen, and garbage collectors from 23 Palestinian villages, a village in Lebanon, as well as shops and soap factories in Tripoli. Remarkably, the public kitchen and bakery remained active even during the British Mandate. The Ottomans upheld the tradition of Muslim tolerance towards Christians. The Greek Orthodox Patriarchate in Jerusalem in the 16th century assumed custodianship of the Christian holy sites, while France became the guardian for the Latin clergy. The Ottomans welcomed Jewish refugees escaping persecution in the Christian Europe. However, even by the mid-19th century, only a handful of Jews had seized the opportunity to establish a presence in the Holy Land. The Ottomans allowed European merchants in the coastal towns of Palestine, exposing the area to Christian and European influences as Ottoman political and military power declined. The Industrial Revolution and European economic penetration increased European political leverage, with granting extraterritorial privileges, served as an avenue that early Zionists, mainly Christian immigrants and settlers, would fully exploit. Prior to the 18th century, both Jews and Christians within the empire predominantly identified themselves as Ottomans. The influx of influence by non-Muslim groups, particularly the Greeks, shaped their perspectives. Jewish refugees escaping the Spanish Inquisition sought refuge in the Ottoman Empire. However, during the 18th century, anti-Semitism gained prominence, influenced by the clash between Arab-Jewish nationalism driven by European tensions introduced by Christian Arabs, later assimilated into the Islamic world. Simultaneously, in the wake of Napoleon's era, Europeans recognized the weakened Ottoman rule and the potential power they could exert in the Holy Land. During the Oriental Crisis of 1840, hostilities between European nations and the Ottomans over the Holy Land came to the forefront. The Sultan aligned with England, Austria, Russia, and Prussia against France and Egypt, as each sought to assert religious control over the sacred territory. France invoked its former rights in the Orient and claimed to safeguard Catholic interests, laying in the Holy Land. Austria cited their responsibility over Catholics in Palestine, aiming to weaken France's influence. Russia, with the largest number of pilgrims and close ties to the Greek Orthodox Christians, sought to safeguard the Greek community, making 90% of Arabian Christians. Prussia aimed to protect Protestants, suggesting a German duke as ruler of Palestine. England lacked legitimate claims but supported Jewish emigration to Palestine. In 1841, they endorsed Prussian demands, leading to the creation of a Protestant diocese in Jerusalem supported by England. This brought significant development to Palestine, following years of neglect during the empire's decline, with Catholic support appointed by the Vatican, resulted in a surge of funds flowing into the region. Initially met with hostility, the Turks perceived this as a plan to drive them out of the Holy Land. During the Crimean War, the sultans granted more rights to Christians and Jews within the empire. It was said that
30 years ago, an American missionary, an Italian physician in the employ of Mehmed Ali, a so-called Baron Müller, a German gardener, and a French drum major were together with me in Jerusalem. And today, what number of Franks, what capital of their intellectual activity? The peaceful crusade has begun. Jerusalem must become ours.
By 1882, churches, orphanages, and hospitals emerged, with the first Protestant church in the Ottoman Empire in 1849. The progress and missionary work of Christians spurred the Jewish community to undertake similar efforts, aiming to prevent their own conversion by Christians being barred from missionary work in Muslim areas, described as
the number of Jews rose from around 5,000 to almost 100,000, and European Christians from a few dozen to about 5,000. Among these were approximately 3,000 Germans, most of whom were settlers from Württemberg and followers of the Temple community who had been immigrating to Palestine since 1868 to build the kingdom of God on earth in Jerusalem.
The German Templar colonies they founded were in Haifa, Jaffa, Sarona, Jerusalem, Wilhelma, Bethlehem, Galilee, and Waldheim, which changed the landscape of Palestine educationally, agriculturally, and economically. The Rothschilds since the early 18th century built infrastructure like the Rothschild Hospital in 1853 with the support of James Jacob Rothschild. In 1888, they moved it outside the Old City, with other English and German hospitals following them to the streets of the prophets. Ottoman Palestine would be forever changed by the movement orchestrated by Theodore Herzl. Theodore Herzl, a renowned Viennese journalist and playwright, founded and lead the Zionist organization. His influential Zionist manifesto, The Jewish State, or Der Judenstaat, was published in 1896. In 1897, he convened the inaugural Zionist Congress to concrete actions towards the establishment of a Jewish state. He was the first president of the Zionist organization for 7 years until his death in 1904. Notably, Herzl is the sole individual mentioned by name in Israel's Declaration of Independence. Today, Herzl's legacy is known for his political Zionism, initially used by Ahad Ha'am, his prominent critic. Recognizing the escalating anti-Semitism in France, Germany, Austria, and Russia, Herzl foresaw the grave consequences for the Jews and strived to establish a territory to safeguard the Jews, saying, "Palestine would attract our people with a force of marvelous potency. Supposing His Majesty the Sultan were to give us Palestine, we could in return undertake to regulate the whole finances of Turkey. We should there form a portion of a rampart of Europe against Asia, an outpost of civilization as opposed to barbarism. We should, as a neutral state, remain in contact with all Europe, which would have to guarantee our existence. The sanctuaries of Christendom would be safeguarded." Herzl's plan echoes the words of Moses Hess, understanding its magnitude. In the vast tapestry of destiny, they both glimpse threads of both foresight and oversight regarding the evolution of the Jewish state, explaining that it will be gradual, continuous, and will cover many decades. The poorest will go first to cultivate the soil. In accordance with a preconcerted plan, they will construct roads, bridges, railways, and telegraph installations, regulate rivers, and build their own habitations. Their labor will create trade, trade will create markets, and markets will attract new settlers, putting itself under the protectorate of the European powers, if they prove friendly to the plan. We could offer the present possessors of the land enormous advantages, take upon ourselves part of the public debt, build new roads for traffic, and do many other things. The creation of our state would be beneficial to adjacent countries. Hence I incline to an aristocratic republic. The society cannot permit the exercise of its functions to be interpreted by short-sighted or ill-disposed individuals. Shall we end by having a theocracy? No, indeed. Faith unites us. Knowledge gives us freedom. We shall keep our priests within the confines of their temples in the same way as we shall keep our professional army within the confines of their barracks. Every man will be as free and undisturbed in his faith or his disbelief as he is in his nationality. We have learnt toleration in Europe. Anti-Semitism of today could only in a very few places be taken for old religious intolerance. The Society of Jews will appoint a council of jurists to do the preparatory work of legislation. During the transition period, these must act on the principle that every emigrant Jew is to be judged according to the laws of the country which he has left. But they must try to bring about a unification of these various laws to form a modern system of legislation. The Jewish state is conceived as a neutral one. But the Jews, once settled in their own state, would probably have no more enemies, and since prosperity enfeebles and causes them to diminish, they would soon disappear altogether. I think the Jews will always have sufficient enemies, such as every nation has. But once fixed in their own land, it will no longer be possible for them to scatter all over the world. The diaspora cannot take place again unless the civilization of the whole earth should collapse, and such a consummation could be feared by none but foolish men. Our present civilization possesses weapons powerful enough for its self-defense. And what glory awaits those who fight unselfishly for the cause. Therefore, I believe that a wondrous generation of Jews will spring into existence. The Maccabeans will rise again. Let me repeat once more my opening words. The Jews who wish will have their state. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil and die peacefully in our own homes. The world will be freed by our liberty, enriched by our wealth, magnified by our greatness. And whatever we attempt there to accomplish for our own welfare will react powerfully and beneficially for the good of humanity. When one studies Zionism, religion cannot be ignored, for it is a crucial piece behind their claim of the Holy Land and why Palestine was chosen. For if religion did not have an impact, they would have moved to more feasible locations.
An activism broke out among the Messianic movements that pushed for the end and tried to speed up the process of deliverance. This contradicted the classical attitude of rabbinical Judaism, the faith in patiently waiting for the Messiah. He will come suddenly without warning, and just when he is least expected or when hope has long been lost, held tightly to the interpretation of exile as being a punishment from God.
In the Tanakh, the idea of Jewish dominion over the Holy Land without the Messiah's arrival is not supported. While Jews may dwell there, governing is reserved for a later time. Despite the views of Moses Hess and Theodore Herzl, the unwavering belief across Abrahamic religions is that a Messiah is essential for guiding a devout people. Mashiach, the Messianic Age's ideal king, is equivalent to Christos in the Gospels. The Old Testament references the Mashiach as God's chosen, like King David. As kingship evolved, the high priest labeled HaKohen HaMashiach embodied this anointed role, symbolizing God's representation in Israel and the connection with the anointed. The Old Testament introduces the personal Messiah with prophets like Isaiah, painting the picture of a future ideal king, Isaiah 11, 1-10, 32, 1-5, from Jesse's lineage, King David's father. This king, characterized by wisdom and righteousness, would usher in an era of peace, justice, and prosperity. He'd earn titles like Wonderful Counselor and Prince of Peace. Echoing these ideals, Jeremiah focuses on a just Davidic descendant, Jeremiah 23, 5, 23, 8, 33, 15, while Ezekiel emphasizes God's paramount role, Ezekiel 38, 16. The recurring dream of a Davidic figure in exilic texts signifies the Jewish hope for a grand revival under a renewed Davidic leader. In the midst of Babylonian captivity, the passages of Deutero-Isaiah, chapters 40-55 of Isaiah, envision Israel as a beacon of salvation for all humanity, guiding nations to the divine. This messianic hope echoes in Isaiah, Micah, and other prophets, all heralding a divine intervention and a new dawn of salvation. During this exile without their temple, the Jewish people found solace in prayer. They gathered thrice daily, morning, Shacharit, afternoon, Mincha, and evening, Ma'ariv, reflecting the rhythm of former sacrifices. On sacred days, an extra prayer symbolized that day's special offerings. Post-exile, these prayers endured. By the 5th century BCE, the men of the Great Assembly crafted the Shemoneh Esrei, or Amidah, embedding 18 blessings that laid the bedrock for Jewish prayer. Within the Amidah lies,
"Return in mercy to Jerusalem, your city, and dwell in it as you have promised. Rebuild it soon in our day as an eternal structure, and quickly set up in it the throne of David. Blessed are you, O Lord, who rebuilds Jerusalem. Speedily cause the offspring of your servant David to flourish, and let him be exalted by your saving power, for we wait all day long for your salvation. Be pleased, O Lord our God, with your people Israel and with their prayers. Restore the service to the inner sanctuary of your temple, and receive in love and with favor both the fire offerings of Israel and their prayers. May the worship of your people Israel always be acceptable to you, and let our eyes behold your return in mercy to Zion. Blessed are you, O Lord, who restores his divine presence to Zion."
In the annals of Jewish thought, Maimonides, an eminent scholar, dreamt of a future where a messianic king would reinvigorate the Davidic kingdom. Yet modern Jewish thinkers see not a person, but a period where Israel's return is divinely guided, especially in light of the state of Israel's establishment. This is Cope. Look at Hosea 3, 4-5, Isaiah 2, 3, 4, Micah 4, 2, 3, others previously noted. Jews do not recognize Jesus as the Mashiach, citing unfulfilled prophecies. However, Shimeon ben Kosiba, a military figure, once raised hopes of being the Mashiach. Leading a revolt against Rome and reclaiming Jerusalem, he sparked hope. Yet Rome's retaliation proved he wasn't the awaited Mashiach, though he remains a significant figure in Jewish history. In the years before Hess and Herzl, numerous false messiahs emerged. With events like the Spanish expulsion and the 1648 Ukrainian revolt, anticipation for the Messiah surged. This fervor peaked in the 17th century with the widespread embrace of Shabbatai Zevi, amassing a following that dwarfs modern Zionism, its impact still evident today. Many Jews hold that returning to the Holy Land and reclaiming their heritage might herald the Messiah's arrival. They hope for divine intervention, signaling a new age and the fulfillment of God's plan. Every action in Israel, from rebuilding houses to international support, is seen as edging closer to Judgment Day. Once I saw this as mere folklore, but deeper study reveals it as the driving force behind choosing Palestine, especially for the religious Eastern Jews. In contrast, Western Jews, though initially indifferent, eventually supported this notion. This sentiment is amplified among Zionist Christians. Christian Zionism views Israel's 1948 establishment as a step towards Jesus Christ's second coming. Rooted in Protestant beliefs since the Reformation, this ideology encourages Jews to adopt Christianity for prophecy fulfillment. After the first Zionist conference, the Basler Volksblatt, a Catholic newspaper in Basel, expressed its perspective on this matter.
We must concur with Dr. Herzl here when he says that in order to return to Palestine, it is first necessary to return to Judaism. We would like to go one step further and say that a Jewish return home only makes sense if it is done with the recognition of the Messiah who was prophesied by the prophets and long awaited by the Jews, but who was then not accepted and maliciously crucified by them. Other prophecies have been fulfilled. This prophecy will also be fulfilled. How? When? God's ways are not our ways, but He will continue to find ways and means of leading His people to salvation. First the return home, then the conversion. We have the same focus, the Messiah.
In Herzl's diary, the three most frequently mentioned people were Christians: Reverend William Henry Heckler, a missionary; Grand Duke Friedrich of Baden, a prince; and Kaiser Wilhelm II, an emperor. Powerful friends in high places. Herzl wrote in his diary,
Reverend William H. Heckler, chaplain of the English embassy here, visited me, a pleasant, sensitive person with a long, gray prophet's beard. As he had finished reading my book, he hurried immediately to the English ambassador, Sir Edmund Monson, and said to him, "The forecast movement has come." Heckler declared my movement to be a biblical one, although I proceed rationally in all. He wants to pass on my book to a number of German princes. He was the preceptor in the house of the Grand Duke of Baden. He knows the German Kaiser personally and believes that he can procure me an audience with him. Heckler announced his willingness to travel to Berlin immediately to speak with the court preacher, Ernst von Dryander, 1842 to 1922, and with Prime Gunther and Prince Heinrich. He thinks that we will travel to Jerusalem very soon and showed me the pocket of his coat, where he would put his great map of Palestine when we travel together in the Holy Land. That was his most naive and convincing feature yesterday.
Through Heckler's influential connections, they convened with Kaiser Wilhelm II and the Sultan in Palestine in 1898, a year after the first Zionist conference, but the Sultan declined their request. The need for Palestine to be free from Ottoman control and the desire for greater support for the Jewish cause found realization during the World Wars.
For the non-religious Jews, the belief in the Messiah was certainly a topic of interest. Theodore Herzl was aware of the conflict between Zionist activism and waiting for the Messiah. He hoped that the Orthodox would understand that there was nothing contrary to God's will in taking one's fate into one's own hands. Most important for Herzl's work was not Messianic hope, however, but the national drive, the vigilant and active personality of the people. In his novel Altneuland, Old Newland, he assigned the longing for the Messiah to those poor, dark times, as our people was not yet capable of reflecting upon itself. This was possibly also a reaction to remarks made since the first Zionist Congress, which praised him as the longed-for Messiah himself.
A group of Orthodox Jews joined the General Association of Rabbis in Germany in 1896, founded in 1884 to combat anti-Semitism. Two prominent rabbis, Selig Auerbach and Marcus Horowitz, were part of the five-headed board. Their first significant action was an internal protest against Zionism, arguing the contradiction to religious principles and supported assimilation to preserve their privileges. Herzl referred to them as protest rabbis in his newspaper Die Welt. They published their protest on July 6, 1897. Declaration due to the Zionist Congress that has been called, and the publication of its agenda, such confusing perceptions of the teachings of Judaism and about the endeavors of its followers have been spread that the board of the Association of Rabbis in Germany, signed below, considers it to be necessary to make the following declaration. The efforts of the so-called Zionists towards the foundation of a Jewish national state in Palestine contradicts the Messianic prophecies of Judaism as they stand in the Holy Scriptures and subsequent religious sources. Judaism obliges its followers to support the fatherland to which they belong, with all devotion, and to serve its national interests with all their heart and all their power. The honorable intentions which relate to the colonization of Palestine by Jewish farmers do not stand in contradiction to this obligation, because they have no relationship whatsoever to the foundation of a national state. Thus, religion and love of the fatherland oblige us to ask all those who have an interest in the well-being of the Jewish people not to become involved in the aforementioned Zionist efforts, and especially in the Congress, which is still supposed to take place despite all the warnings. Some rabbis like Arthur Cohn and Moritz Gudemann initially supported Zionism, but later turned against it, with Moritz even saying to Herzl once,
"You look to me like Moses. Don't change. Maybe you are God's chosen."
Like every organized meeting, there is a program to follow. The program set out the goals of the Zionist movement was as follows.
Zionism seeks to secure for the Jewish people a publicly recognized, legally assured homeland in Palestine. For the attainment of this purpose, the Congress considers the following means serviceable. 1. The promotion of the settlement of Jewish agriculturists, artisans, and businessmen in Palestine. 2. The federation of all Jews into local or general groups, according to the laws of the various countries. 3. The strengthening of the Jewish feeling and consciousness. 4. Preparatory steps for the attainment of those governmental grants which are necessary to the achievement of the Zionist purpose.
The Zionist Congress opened on August 29, 1897, for 3 days. A white flag with blue strips and a Star of David was displayed. It wasn't the Jewish national flag. David Wolfson created it for the Congress. Around 196 to 246 people attended, including 14 to 21 women. They focused on agreeing on the Basel program, which served as a starting point for discussions. Time was limited, with reports restricted to 30 minutes and speeches to 10 minutes. German was the official language, and Hebrew, Russian, and English secretaries were hired. The first day centered on the situation of Jews in different countries. Herzl's opening speech emphasized the need to dispel negative views on Zionism and the necessity of strict organization. He was seen by some as the king of the Jews.
Zionism really is a civilized, legal, humanistic movement in accordance with the ancient goal of the longing of our people.
Faith in him and the organization grew, followed by Max Nordau's powerful words about the poverty-stricken Jewish areas. Nathan Birnbaum and David Farbstein emphasized the necessity of Zionism for security, economy, and bridging East and West. On the second day, practical steps were discussed, with Herzl's suggestion of public law for guaranteeing the homeland accepted. The third day witnessed debates on the organization's structure, including the selection of representatives due to restrictions in some countries. Assumptions about Palestine's situation and living conditions were plentiful but bad assumptions. But all attendees were unity. Herzl was quite satisfied with the conclusion of the conference, with him writing in his journal on September 3, 1897,
If I were to summarize the First Congress in one word, which I would be wary of uttering in public, I would say this: in Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I said this aloud today, I would be laughingstock of the whole world. Perhaps in 5, at most in 50 years, everyone will see.
Zionism underwent a complex evolution, influenced by various individuals like Herzl, the Kaiser, and the Rothschilds. As these different players pursued their visions for the movement, divisions emerged, resulting in a struggle for dominance. Herzl envisioned a utopian European Jewish society acting as a bridge between Europeans and Arabs, leading the world and embracing European ideals. But once he passed away, fragmentation ensued. Such is the nature of human endeavors when left without a guiding hand. To start, political Zionism. Securing legal land and sovereignty became a priority for Western Zionists, well-versed in European legal and political systems, before embarking on settlement projects. Practical Zionism. Eastern Zionists advocated for immediate colonization without political safeguards, accustomed to facing hardships and pogroms as outsiders. A subgroup, Zion, staunchly rejected offers outside Palestine, like Uganda and Argentina, proposed by Herzl and Western Zionists. Synthetic Zionism. Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel after the Provisional State Council, adopted synthetic Zionism, a combination of practical and political Zionism, with many Zionists identifying with this. General Zionism. Prior to WE1, it arose for the moderate Zionists who did not pick any side yet. They called for building up Palestine as well as for equal rights for the Jewish diaspora with national autonomy. Cultural Zionism. Ahad Ham led an earlier movement, aiming to establish Palestine as a religious center to address the complex Jewish identity issue. Some Western Jews downplayed cultural discussions, prioritizing acquiring land. Herzl disregarded the cultural aspect, fearing Eastern rabbis' escape from the movement. This approach led young Eastern Jews to embrace social and revisionist Zionism. As Ahad Ham stepped back, Martin Buber, Chaim Weizmann, Leo Motzkin, and Berthold Feivel advocated integrating Jewish culture into society, emphasizing Hebrew language, schools, gyms, etc. This influence was evident in the short-lived 1926 Peace Alliance's proposal for a binational state between Jews and Arabs in Palestine. If cultural Zionism was victor, we would have for sure seen a more peaceful Middle East. Ahad Ham would go on to critically critique the path the Zionist Congress was taking in Palestine, and how important changing the culture is before moving the culture anywhere. Territorial Zionism. They viewed Palestine as a distant solution, while refugees needed immediate security. They looked for other places outside Palestine for security. The Uganda scheme arose amidst the Russian pogroms in 1903, but Eastern Zionists strongly rejected it. Israel Zangwill supported the British offer as a quick response to Jewish discrimination. Their only achievements were agreements in America, such as Galveston, Texas, and the Midwest. They disbanded in 1925. Religious Zionism, created from the rabbis, declared no support from any party, and focused on completing the original Basel program on the basis on the Torah and the spirit of tradition. Socialist Zionism, emerging in late 19th century Eastern Europe, influenced by Jewish religion and modern socialist theory like Moses Hess. They envisioned an egalitarian society in Palestine. Drawing from Marxism, they formed various subgroups, spanning from social democratic to communist ideologies. Their impact on Zionism persisted, with significant influence on the Histadrut, Mapai, and youth groups, both before and after Israel's establishment. The Communist Party of Israel, Maki, was a communist political party in Israel that was established in 1948. Revisionist Zionism, the dominant ideology in Israel's formation, and led by Vladimir Zeev Jabotinsky in 1925. Revision represented a return to Herzl's view of the Jewish state. They wanted land from the Nile Valley to the Euphrates by force, representing Jewish nationalism. Many East European Jews joined them, opposing the Zionist organization and Chaim Weizmann's presidency for being moderate and defensive. They have many accusations of fascism, especially with the creation of the Beitar, a militant religious organization, always dressed in uniform. They also gave birth to revolutionary Zionism, wanting to create the Davidic Empire, Greater Israel. The revisionists and socialists won over the Zionist people, with the revisionists taking the lead. The revisionists were assertive and formed underground terrorist organizations like the Irgun and Lehi, fighting everyone during the British Mandate. They split from the Zionist organization, later forming the Herut Party with nationalistic leanings. Herut produced the sixth Prime Minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, who was a part of the terrorist group commanding the Beitar in Poland, and founded another political party, the Likud, which gave rise to Benjamin Netanyahu. They are an extension of the zeitgeist of the past few decades. The youth's influence in every movement cannot be ignored, shaping the future of Israel. The first was the Bilu, formed in 1881. They left Russia during the pogrom of 1881 in Russia. Ages ranged from 15 to 25, considered the first official Aliyah. The rest of the youth groups were after 1897, with each one having an opposing group. Youth groups were divided into socialist, revisionist, and religious, all supporting active and practical Zionism. Bund anti-Zionist and social democrats approved of Yiddish autonomy in Poland and Russia, being one of the biggest youth groups in Poland between the wars. Zaira Agudat Israel, ultra-Orthodox and anti-Zionist. Pt.II, established in 1904, wanted socialist agricultural settlements and redemption through physical work, leading the Second Aliyah. Their most prominent member is David Ben-Gurion, the first president of Israel during the Provisional State Council and Yishuv's leader. By 1927, 43% of Jewish workers in Palestine were trained by them. They evolved into Mapai, the core of today's Labor Party. Ehud Habonim, founded 1958, social democratic and related to the Hekeluts. Gordonia, founded in 1923, supported the establishment of Eretz Israel with self-commitment through education on humanistic values and the renaissance of Hebrew culture focusing on lower Jewish society, inspired by Aaron David Gordon. Hashomer Hazair, founded in 1916, inspired by German and Russian youth movements, with pronounced Zionism and socialism. They formed the Palma, elite troops during the British Mandate. Bitar, founded in 1923 by Zeev Jabotinsky, was a revisionist youth group, being anti-socialist and strong rivals to Hashomer Hazair, and wanted free immigration and self-defense. B'nai Akiva, founded in 1929, a socialist-inspired religious youth group of the Zionist Mizrachi from Abraham Isaac Kook, based on Rabbi Bar Kokhba, who formed the foundation of the Mishnah. They drifted to the right wing and involve 35% of all Jewish youth in Israel today. In Part 3, we will investigate the writings of Ahad Ham and his predictions of the nationalistic view the Zionists embraced, leading up to the first Arab-Zionist conflict in 1913, shadowing the future struggles to pass. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe.